Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Marvel Fan Theories podcast. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Katie, and we're two sisters and borderline obsessed Marvel fans who have been following the Marvel Cinematic Universe closely for years. And now we want to share our MCU discussions with you.
We chat about our own predictions and theories, plus some of our favorites from online, and our reactions to all of the Marvel content that's considered MCU canon, including the Disney Plus shows and the movies, as well as the Marvel news you need to know. Well, it's hard to believe, but we have arrived at yet another season finale for a live-action Marvel show. In fact, the last season finale of the year. 2021 is wrapping up, and so did Hawkeye this week with the release of episode 6. And now it's time for us to break it down. Katie, why don't you start?
I'm going to start with saying what I think we literally were just talking about. I love this show, and I still love this show. It still probably takes the cake for all of them. But the season finale was a little, I think it had a lot of things happening in it, but it didn't really feel important. I don't know if that's the right word. I just kind of I think for me personally, I look at a lot of the things of, I like to step away from the shows and be like, okay, what did this show add? I think is really my big thing. Obviously, we know with WandaVision, the major implications from hers, even the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, there were a lot of Sam as Cap. I mean, even the whole super soldier idea that finished that storyline finally. Loki, whether you like it or not, I mean, that had multiverse implications. So it was okay. And then I'm gonna be honest, taking a step back from this, I kind of am what did this really add to the bigger MCU?
Yeah, I think too, and maybe I just need to hop off the hype train online sometimes, but I could have sworn I was seeing things from Marvel and other things where, they were saying episode 6, it really blows apart the MCU, it has major implications, so I was going in thinking, this is going to be really intense, and, there's going to be a lot of really big ramifications moving forward for franchises outside of just Hawkeye and Kate. And there weren't. I mean, I know we'll get into some of the things that it did lead into, but I just thought, I don't know, I was expecting a little more. And for the end credit scene to be just an extended version of Rogers the Musical, I was this is cute, but not what I'm looking for.
Well, it's kind of what I was saying in the sense of just you sit there waiting for the, what more is there, what it's really gonna add. And it was I don't know. Obviously, there are, I would say, 4 characters that have important continuations. But I think, and we'll get into that, but I think one of my other issues is just, and I love Hawkeye in the sense of, after the show, I like Clint as a character more. I think it actually gave him the depth he probably always deserved to have had.
Agreed.
And I think that's part of the reason people didn't really like him as an Avenger, and he was a lot of people's least favorite, was just because it was he never got any depth to his character. He was just kind of always there. And then they randomly were here's my family. And that was supposed to be his depth. And I was but what? So I like him as a character, but I feel okay, so he's sticking around. He's not done. There's been no conclusion on where that lies.
Not to mention, they're not, they were very clear when it was Loki, sorry, that's a bad example. When it was Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it was a series finale. And they made that clear. Even WandaVision, they called it a mini-series, and then they said it was a series finale. And Lizzie has come out and said, I don't know how you would even bring that back. But they very clearly called Hawkeye a season finale, which means, and I mean, the door narratively is open for a season 2, which I wouldn't be upset about. But I guess I just wasn't expecting that. I don't know.
I mean, I'd be fine with a season 2. And I think maybe that would help. And maybe that would lead into Clint's full retirement and, stuff like that. Because, I expected one of 2 outcomes here. Clint retiring, and that was the end of that. Or, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but Clint being killed off.
Yeah.
I saw it ending one of 2 ways. Not the he's still in business kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm thrilled they didn't kill him off.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this extensively in past episodes. I'm so happy he's still around. Like I said, and I think you touched on this too, there's a lot more emotional investment in Clint now, and to build that up only to rip the character away in his last episode in the MCU, that would be really kind of a low blow. So I'm glad they didn't do that. I also think they, in a weird way, they wrapped up his ties with the Avengers, right? Natasha was his last loose thread, if you will, Natasha, and then by extension, Yelena. So in essence, he's done with the Avengers, but that opens him up to, like, more solo opportunities with Kate. So I could see them doing, like, almost like a buddy cop type thing until she's ready to be in the Young Avengers. Because they're still building that out.
Right. So, I guess moving into the show, I mean, obviously, I guess, like, the beginning's happening, we get the preview, what went on, blah, 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 blah. Really, the biggest part is this is the final battle show. You know, this has kind of been Marvel's big, I guess, structure to every show is the final battle. And that's always the season/series finale. And, you know, I thought it was interesting in the sense that, you know, well, like I've said before, Kate's mom being as involved as she is, I think we mentioned from the get-go, she clearly, from the Battle of New York, she profited off of something there. And the sense of it was that Kate's father was actually the one who was initially indebted to Kingpin.
Which I thought was so interesting, and I wish they had gone into more, because she idolized her father. And so, I want to just straighten something out really quick. Just because he's indebted to Kingpin did not mean he was working for him.
Right.
You know, so I don't want to make that assumption. But he still was colluding and working with someone who is a known criminal.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super interesting, again, because, like, Kate, you know, you can still see, like, her dad is her hero. Even, you know, when she was looking at the photos, like, that's what spurred her on. Was, like, in episode 5, that's what spurred her on, was, like, the photos with her dad. So I thought it was interesting that they're knocking her dad down a peg, like, in her hero worship.
Well, what I kind of thought was interesting was, like, when her mother was trying to explain it to her, she was like, he was indebted and I had to pay it off. But then I was like, okay, but that doesn't make you still the better person because you stayed involved.
Yeah.
You know, like, you didn't need to stay involved the way you were. And I think Kingpin even says, and look at you. Like, he's like, and aren't you wealthy too? Like, he even straight up was like, what did you get out of this?
Clearly
everything.
This was a mutually beneficial arrangement.
Yeah, he's like, you got everything out of this. So why are you all of a sudden on this high horse? And I think I mentioned in one of the blogs as well, you know, where Kate's mother tends to draw a line, whether or not it's great the way she goes about it or not is her daughter. And we saw that in this episode.
But it's interesting. It's not about her daughter's safety. It's never about Kate's safety. No. It's about Kate knowing the truth.
Yeah.
Even when we talked about this in that episode, when she confronted Clint, it was under the guise of it being about Kate's safety, but the truth was she didn't want Kate to know the truth. And even now she said, Kate's getting too close. And the implication wasn't, she's getting too close, she might get hurt. It was, she's getting too close, she might find out.
But I thought it was then really underplayed almost of, like, when she did confront her mother. But I will say, her mother strikes me as the kind of person we're not done necessarily seeing her. But she also had the very ominous last sayings of, oh, does a hero arrest their mother on Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas or something like that? And I thought that was a little ominous to the fact that she clearly now looks down on her daughter for being a quote-unquote hero. Not that Kate isn't, but you know what I'm saying. So I thought that was kind of interesting and why I was like, I don't necessarily know if we'd see the end of Kate or of Eleanor.
I'm so glad you said that because I immediately, when that like whole scene was happening, I thought to myself, Kate's arch enemy. Everybody has one, right? In some cases, Thor's is Loki. Cap obviously has Red Skull. Like, everybody has, like, their one iconic villain. Spider-Man has, like, 6, but he's just awesome. But I was like, oh, so Kate's arch nemesis is her mom.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what that just set up right there.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. I was like, that's sucky for Kate, but also kind of cool.
Yeah, and I mean, you could always, I think her mom even mentioned how Kate and her never really had the best connection. So it was like it was starting from the get-go. They didn't get along the way Kate and her mother did, and it just...
Her father?
That's what I meant, sorry. And, you know, Kate went one way and her mom went the other. But I thought that was really interesting. And then moving right into the whole Jack thing, what did we say about him being a red herring? Like,
yeah, I will say, though, we were wrong. We thought maybe he was in cahoots with Eleanor, that, like, they kind of worked out that he would just take the fall, but, like, nothing would really come of it. Jack ended up being, like, a golden retriever, and I'm really okay with it. I kind of love him.
Well, it's not even that he ended up being a golden retriever. He always was, but because we were so under the guise that he was a bad guy, like, we were like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, no. But I have to say, for those of you who did read the blog post referring to him as a swordsman and giving a little more detail on him, I really liked what they did here, because the swordsman is known actually to kind of jump back and forth between being involved in kind of the petty crime kind of community and then being an Avenger, or at least being involved with the Avengers. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they continued to show that, in the sense of he was involved in a sense with the wrong side, and then at the end he still came out for the side of the good guys. So I thought that was really interesting, kind of staying true to his actual comic book character.
One other thing I thought was interesting, and this is just more the Bishop family dynamics, was that Kate's mom, like, when the crap hit the fan, she ran. But when the crap hit the fan, Jack saved his soon-to-be stepdaughter. Like, he stepped in and said, I'm going to protect you. And Kate's mom was like, peace out, like, I'm gone.
Well, and, you know, to be fair, like, Kate from the get-go was like, people are here to kill you, like, what are you doing? And Kate's mom was like, I have this under control. What did you have under control of any of that?
There were snipers, sweetheart. You were done.
Like, you had not a single thing under control. But moving further into it now, because I feel like we talked about Eleanor, we've talked about Jack. We had Yelena. Yelena and Kate's dynamic, once again.
Oh my god.
Perfect.
They're just so funny.
And even Kate said it best. She was like, stop making me like you.
I know.
was like, exactly. Like, I love it, and it made me really happy to the point of, you know, this is our next Hawkeye and Black Widow duo, and you could just tell. That's what they're building. And I love the, let's get a drink. Okay. After I kill Hawkeye. She's like, not what I meant. But Yelena looked so happy to have, like, someone there.
Even in episode 5, when she says, thank you for the girls' night, truly. Like, there's a level of sincerity there.
Yeah.
Because without Natasha, I mean, she obviously spent time with the widows when she was freeing the other widows. There were some people who were helping her, and I'm sure she bonded with them. But without her sister, and now that she's, you know, since she's come back in the blip, I don't get the impression that she's back releasing the widows anymore.
Yeah, I don't either.
So she's essentially alone.
Yeah.
And so I think for her to even though she was, like, low-key threatening Kate and, you know, interrogating her for information, for Yelena, that's a pretty solid girls' night.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. And so I love their connection. I just thought it was so great. And then obviously, like, moving into the big part of this episode was Yelena and Hawkeye's or Clint's conversation. And I just have to say, like, I genuinely thought Yelena was going to kill Clint. Because I'm not going to lie, somewhere a long time ago, and by a long time ago, I mean sometime in the past few weeks that the show's been on, but my life has made it feel like it's been 5 months. I remember seeing something about the season finale really, like, ripping people apart.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the rumors started that Clint was going to die.
Which, honestly, that's kind of the rumor I think the rumor you referenced and the one I referenced earlier were kind of related. Underwhelmed on both fronts, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want him to die, but...
No, same, but I even, like, yes, there was an emotional punch, but it wasn't like I thought last week was more of an emotional gut punch than this week.
Well, and, yeah, so, but, like, then with that, I genuinely kind of was like, you know, what would mess with me more than having one of my now new favorites since Black Widow characters kill an original Avenger?
Yeah, that's hard to come back from.
Yeah, I was like, what would genuinely, like, bother me the most and leave me sitting there like, Marvel did not just do that?
Yeah.
So when she started beating him with that stick, I literally was like, oh my god. Like, they're actually... And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, oh my god. Just, like, tell her. Like, he's like, you wouldn't get... I'm like, just tell her. Like, she got snapped out of existence and blipped back for 5 years later. You don't think she'd somewhat maybe start to believe the fact that this is how your sister, or how you technically got the stone? I don't know. I was just like, okay. But I will say that was emotional, and I think that leads right into the now what for Yelena kind of portion of this. Because she's a character that I think we can almost 100% say, without any sort of hesitancy, that she'd be back.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, Eleanor, I can make the guess that I wouldn't expect to necessarily see her fade completely.
No, I think once Kate becomes the primary Hawkeye in the MCU, like, I think Clint's on his way out. I think it's taking him a little longer than we all expected, which I'm fine with, because now he has new depth that I am willing to explore and excited about exploring. But once Kate takes over as the primary Hawkeye, I could see Eleanor resurfacing as more of a bigger villain again, because I think she is, in her own way, her daughter's arch nemesis.
Yeah, and that's, so, like, she, you know, she's got a chance. Jack, I don't know if we'd see him again. I wouldn't be against it.
I love Jack.
Yeah, now that, like, he's had his moment, I wouldn't be against it, but who knows, he might because there are a lot of characters in the comics that are just that are there. They play a lot of roles, but they get brought into the MCU and they kind of just play one singular role and it happens and then it moves on. So we might not. But obviously Yelena is a character we'll see again, and she just up and disappears. So the question now is, where is Yelena?
Yeah. I mean, I have to think she's going back to Valentina. I mean, she's gonna be in the Dark Avengers. Like, I mean, that hasn't been confirmed, but I think it would be a big miss if they kept her out of the not the Young Avengers.
Well, especially because she was already involved, essentially.
Right. Right.
So,
and people love Yelena. So I would find it really hard to believe that she's not going to be in that franchise. Are there going to be ramifications for her not completing the mission?
That's what I was thinking about.
Probably. But Kingpin took some hits tonight. So whether or not he continues to be a big customer of Valentina's remains to be seen.
Well, to be fair, it also wasn't him who hired Yelena. It was Eleanor. So,
but I think she was doing it on behalf of Kingpin.
Still,
right? But
because to be fair, we have not had a full, in-depth look at what the Valentina and Kingpin relationship is. It's very possible for Valentina, Eleanor Bishop's name was on that piece of paper, and that was all she needed. And
with Eleanor in jail, the customer doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm sure she pays, and to your point, with her in jail, I mean that changes kind of the aspect of whether really finishing the mission was that important anymore, because it's she's arrested.
Yeah.
So, I think, to your point, I would expect to still see Yelena working for Valentina. I mean, we definitely thought she was kind of being tricked from, I think, the end of Black Widow, and she really wasn't. I don't think Valentina even knew the knowledge that she had.
At the very least, I think you can take it two ways. One, Valentina didn't really know. No, but I don't think very many people besides the Avengers who were there actually know. So the Core Six and Scott actually know what happened on Vormir. I think that's not something the Avengers released publicly. So it's possible Valentina didn't know. At the very least, she just kept the information from Yelena.
Yeah.
So it's a lie of omission, not an outright lie. Because what were Valentina's exact words? The man responsible for your sister's death? Depending on how you look at the situation on Vormir, it's not a lie.
Yeah, I mean, I think Yelena says in the battle, it was you could have done more, or something of that nature, or you could have, tried harder. And I think that could have just as much been the argument, is that he could have tried harder to stop Nat.
Yeah.
So yeah, I still expect to see Yelena in the Young Avengers, in the Dark Avengers. Do I expect to see her anything before then? No. At this point, I truly don't expect to see. There's been nothing that guides me to think that she would be in something prior to that, probably film at that point.
Yeah.
So I think that would be our next seeing or sighting. Not seeing.
Yeah. The only thing I could think, and this is not even been hinted at, this is just an off-the-wall theory.
You're going to say MOM?
No.
Oh, okay, because I was going to be
no.
Please don't. That's a whole other
No, it's so
problem.
full already. I just know. If they gave her own Black Widow franchise, because people do like her so much.
And they didn't do it for...
Yes.
Although my only thing is...
Exactly. Yes.
For the people who didn't understand the conversation that just silently happened.
Not in our mental conversation.
The only issue with giving Yelena the Black Widow franchise would be that they never gave Scarlett Johansson her full franchise. So I think that would be a partially bad look.
Oh, for sure. And that's why I'm saying I don't think it's going to happen, but that's the only other place I could see her fitting in.
If anything, maybe a show.
Maybe.
I could get her but obviously we've seen the slate for the next, about 2 years? So I think we're probably...
I will say, though, for example, when we saw the slate last year, Echo wasn't on it at all. And now it's coming out in 23. So I think they pick and choose what they release to us in terms of, Disney Plus Day and what they tell us for the next 2 years. And then they're like, oh, by the way, this show's coming out next year that you didn't know about that we've been secretly working on.
That's fair.
So not out of the realm of possibility, but wouldn't be my first choice if I had to, put money on it. I'm just, putting it out there in case there's anything before our Dark Avengers that she would be in.
Yeah. Well, and so you brought up Kingpin then, and I think that's a great person to bring up to. First off, I want to correct myself. I was wrong. I wrote in the blog that I did think that Kingpin would not be involved in the final battle himself. I truly didn't expect him to be.
I didn't either.
I definitely expected the tracksuits, and I said that. I definitely also had said Kazi will be the one leading the tracksuits into the battle. Maya will not. So I called that, but I really did not expect to see Kingpin actually there, let alone fighting.
Yeah, I was shocked, one, that they chose to go that route. And two, I've said this many times, I could not get through Daredevil, not because I didn't like the show, just too much for me, gore-wise. I'm a little bit of a wimp when it comes to that stuff. It just made me stressed. I'm gonna try it again because now I feel like I have to because of, both of them coming back in, the span of a week.
That's also true.
But I say all this to say I'm not really familiar with his fighting style and how not overbearing, but overpowering he is in a fight. So that really shook me. That, shocked me how he was able to just, toss Kate like she was, a piece of, I don't even know, like a cookie or something. Like, he was just get out of my way, child.
I genuinely was blatantly surprised, though, that he was even there to begin with.
Yeah.
I really was. As soon as he was in that car, or not, was he in the car? No,
he grabbed Eleanor, yeah.
I was like, no, he wasn't the one in the car. Because I thought they were going to pan over and he was going to be sitting there.
Me too.
But I was really surprised for him to even be there, let alone, go into this whole battle. But the battle's not even what I think we need to touch on. The most important thing is, what the heck with Echo or Maya? What the heck? He's not dead. Because you can't, there's no way that Marvel brought in one of the last notorious Spider-Man villains that no one has been able to see on screen with Spider-Man before due to the Sony and Marvel battles. And so it's never been done before. There's no way they finally brought him in.
In the same week, we finally saw Matt Murdock in the MCU.
In an episode and a half and killed him off.
Yeah. I agree.
There's a reason it wasn't an on-screen death.
Oh, yes. No blood on the screen, no death. What have we learned? If you don't see it, it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly. So that's why, for me, he's not dead. If I didn't know that Maya was getting her own show, I straight up would be like, nah, he got Maya. Yeah. But I know she's got, although, to be fair, there is no actual confirmation what the show and when the show takes place. So it's very fair to at least be able to maybe say, the show could have taken place prior to it. And I wouldn't love if they did that because she's an interesting enough character that I would like to see her further down the road. But it is the possibility that they could have set the show prior to Hawkeye.
While that's true, and I could be really, really wrong about this, because I only have a very surface knowledge of her comic history, and again, Marvel doesn't always follow that, so this is real tangential.
They actually did, though, pretty well with her.
With this. I don't think she really becomes Echo until she becomes good, or at least an anti-hero. She has that whole fight with Kazi, which I'm sure we'll get to next, where she's wanting to get out of the life and she's wanting to do better and be better. So I don't really think that she becomes, takes on the mantle of Echo until she makes that choice. So that's why I think it has to take place after Hawkeye. They also said it was a spin-off show. I'm pretty sure that was the exact language used in the Disney Plus Day announcement. So if it's going to be a spin-off, it would be hard for it to be a prequel.
Yeah, well, that's why it's still because there's no confirmation, just a possible thought. Although, like I said, there's no confirmation anyone died in that alley that day. But,
yeah,
there's no way that Kingpin has been killed.
Well, and you saw, this was weird to me, when Kate shot him with the arrow and he just broke the thing off and was like, what do you think you're gonna do with this stick? That was weird, but also, could he do the same thing with a bullet? TBD.
Or just not necessarily hurt him. Although I feel at the same time, I feel Maya, of all people, would be, pretty aware.
Oh, she'd be a headshot.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Unless it was a misfire in the sense that he pushed her arm away, or to whatever extent that necessarily was that he maybe, and that's why we don't see it. It wants you to think about it, but there's no removing her from the situation, and there's no removing him, not with her show, and not with him. I'm gonna admit, this is one of those things that, and I think I've said this before with Spider-Man, I've said this before with multiple shows and movies, if Marvel did this, it would be a very stupid move.
It would be a waste.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be like what I said about Spider-Man, where, with the whole, like, 3 Spideys. If I was like, if they don't do this, they wasted their time.
Yeah.
Personally, you could bring all the villains back you want. That's not the point. That's not what the fans want. They know that's not what the fans want. Like, I loved seeing them, but, you know what I mean? It would just be a waste. So, you know, that's not the end of either of them. To my belief, it's a misfire of some sort.
Yeah.
And from where they go, I mean, like I said, Maya has her own show coming out, and so that'll be her next appearance, and I expect to see Kingpin in a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to tie him back to Daredevil again.
No.
I need them to clarify for me if Netflix's Daredevil is canon. I just need
It doesn't sound like, the way that Kevin was talking, it doesn't necessarily sound that way, just because he said, right before, you know, the movie, if we were going to have a Daredevil, it would be Charlie. So, my assumption is, the way that he went about saying that, it didn't necessarily sound like he was, because to be fair, if you bring the Netflix show in, you almost have to talk about the Defenders.
Yeah, and we talked about this, I think, in the Spider-Man reaction episode, that, like, that's not likely. I guess I need it in black and white. I need it coming out of Kevin's mouth that it's not canon and that we should not take anything that happened before as a past for the characters that we're seeing now. That we should clean slate completely, even though they're the same actors, and that's fine. Or is it, I guess my question really more is it another universe? Like, is that Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk from another timeline? That's fine too.
Yeah.
I just need to know, is that how I should be thinking about it?
Well, I'm sure
what?
with the appearance of both of them, we might get that answer sooner than later.
Yeah.
In the sense that now fans are going to question it a little more. But, like I said, my next thought on Kingpin is going to be a Spider-Man movie. I don't think for a second that it won't be.
Well, with Tom's Peter back in Manhattan, you're basically setting it up.
Well, and the fact that literally he was sitting, like, his apartment's, like, right next to Rockefeller Center.
Yeah.
Which is literally where they just had the entire fight. And I will say, I was one of the fans kind of hoping for a slight Spidey appearance.
Just a fly-through?
Just because, to be fair, you could have set the movie at any other time. Yeah. And they were like, we're gonna set the movie at Christmas time. Which also, I feel like needs to eventually get talked about, when we do a discussion on the timeline a little bit, we'll talk about what that means with Far From Home and No Way Home, where it was actually placed, but we'll get into that at a different time. But regardless, I don't know, I was a little sad that we didn't get a little something, just because I think this is something I've now seen a lot of people pointing out now that Spidey's back in Manhattan, where he's supposed to be, and just in general, like, people were pointing out, like, the whole, like, oh, you know, cracks in the skyline, but Kate and Clint are out here 4 blocks away, just everything's normal kind of thing. And I thought that was kind of interesting because we pointed this out, where it was like
2 different years, though.
But regardless, my point still being, and I think people's point going with that is, you got heroes in New York. Like, I think something that Spider-Man, and the only reason I really talk about Spider-Man is because of the implications of some of the characters, along with, you know, New York being the general place, is, you know, the other Spider-Man really pointed out as well, they didn't have the Avengers. They didn't have other heroes running around the streets. The thing is with the MCU, you do. And that's what kind of agitates me, is I'm like, that's why I wanted to see a Spidey appearance. Because I was like, let's make it make sense a little bit that these people know the other one exists to some degree.
Nah, they don't.
Well, they know Spider-Man exists. They don't know Peter's Spider-Man.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So, nah, they do.
But I'm just saying, it's not like before, where Peter went up to Doctor Strange and was like, hey, Steven, remember when we went to space? Hey, now can you do a spell
But I'm just saying, like, you know, there's a battle in the middle of Rockefeller Plaza. Doctor Strange is in the city. I'm not saying that necessarily something for him, but I'm just
but we don't actually know that Doctor Strange is there, because this is after Multiverse of Madness.
Well, regardless of people who supposedly were supposed to be in New York, we have Doctor Strange, we have Spider-Man. Those are both at least prominent people who, and I'm not saying necessarily at that point, but I'm just saying, in general, when all this stuff happens, that's the big difference between Toby and Andrews, is like, they don't have other heroes literally living in the city. Versus...
Yeah. One thing I did catch, we rewatched episode 5 before watching episode 6 today, And one thing I caught was Yelena says something about the new and improved Statue of Liberty when she's in Kate's apartment, which now makes a whole heck of a lot more sense after seeing No Way Home. So
Except they destroyed it, and so they had to rebuild it again.
Yeah. So just in case anybody needed that extra confirmation, this is set after No Way Home. I know they've confirmed that verbally and Kevin has said it, but like now we're actually seeing in-universe references that show like, no, this happened, that movie happened, and we're moving past it now.
Yeah. So, but that's why for me, like I've said, I kind of wanted the Spidey swing by something just because I was like, I feel like we need to kind of address, like, even with No Way Home being done beforehand, that means he's been established in the city as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'd kind of like to see a little bit of something because there's a like, he's got a police radar, but you're telling me that didn't show up of all things, you know?
I'm gonna just play devil's advocate, there weren't actually any cops. If you notice, there was not a single cop.
Well, but all the LARPers are also cops, and then all the cops came and arrested Eleanor.
Yeah, after it was done.
Yeah, but still.
I'm just saying, playing devil's advocate, there was not a cop during the actual battle.
But still. You would think there'd be some kind of reports coming through. I mean, those are the rich people.
Yeah.
Like,
that's fair.
So, I don't know. I was a little bit I was the one kind of rooting for the swing by, didn't get it. I do hope Marvel kind of addresses somewhere in there, eventually, the fact that we have heroes who are all kind of located in a similar spot. And to be fair, I mean, they kind of opened certain doorways with the fact that not everyone knows Spider-Man's Peter, with the fact that now they can kind of establish him with other heroes.
Heck, he could, go meet Kate Bishop on the subway or something.
That's what he could now be a part of the Young Avengers if they had really wanted to. That kind of thing. Because, now his slate is almost wiped clean for everyone else but him.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
What a demotion if you're Peter Parker.
Yeah, literally. But, so we see that. We see Kingpin.
I want to talk about the Kazi and Maya fight.
I called that. I called that rift from the beginning.
You did. I was just really sad, especially, I couldn't tell, throughout the show if there was, something more going on than just, friends. It was kind of,
I think it was supposed to be, more of a sibling relationship, is what my understanding eventually landed on, but I also at first was unsure.
Oh, see, I landed more romantic, because she was asking him to run away with her, so I was like, that's interesting.
Oh, I just kind of read it as she was, they both were probably to a degree, he's been around for a long enough time to establish himself, she was raised in it, so I just kind of assumed, especially because they seemed the closest in age compared to all the other tracksuits, and everyone else involved. So to me, I kind of read it more as they kind of found refuge in each other. And so, but I know we talk about Kazi, but I have to bring up Kingpin for one more second. I will have to say, it did kind of make my heart hurt that he also learned sign language for her as, something Kazi even points out is you thought, in one of the other episodes, I learned this for you, you think any of these other idiots know what's going on kind of thing. And then you see Kingpin had learned it to speak.
You can tell he genuinely loves her, and he's so sad that she's turned on him. And it actually reminded me of the one other time we see Kingpin on screen is Into the Spider-Verse. And it's been a minute since I've seen that movie, but isn't his whole motivation he wants to save his daughter? So it's not...
I'm telling you right now, I've watched it once when it came out. You're asking the wrong person that question.
I feel like that's part of the storyline, and so for me, I think it's just interesting that no matter what iteration, and again, I haven't seen all of Daredevil, but in the 2 iterations I've seen, he does have that softer side for his family, and that just, made my heart melt a little bit, even though I know he's, literally cruel and awful, but
see, for me it was more of the, and I even said this while we were watching it, I was like, it reminds me a lot of Thanos and Gamora, where she eventually sees him as the monster he is, she learns to resent him, she doesn't want to be anywhere near him, but he does truly love her, and there is that aspect where he's like, I helped to raise you, I've been in your life, and immediately I thought of that same dynamic, and you could just feel it. I did like that, and I wanted to bring that up. But to Kazi and all that, did I expect him to die? No.
I didn't either.
I didn't. I genuinely thought he would kind of go on to lead the tracksuits. We'd see him later on, possibly in Echo, being that, being a big foe for her, because that's a hard battle. But she went and was, within 5 minutes, killed him. And I know she didn't want to, but I genuinely didn't think that she would do it. now.
Yeah, it almost struck me the way the scene was choreographed with the fight that it was almost an accident, like kind of like an instinctual thing. Like he came at her and she instinctively just did what she had to do and ended up stabbing him in the middle of it. Like, I don't know that it was an intentional, like, kill on her part because she was so reluctant to do that. So I thought that was very interesting. And I think if I had to hazard a guess, like, that's something that I think we're gonna see her deal with emotionally, or I would like to see her deal with emotionally in Echo, because I think, you know, whether you read their relationship as more romantic or more sibling, either way, she killed someone who meant a lot to her, and that comes with ramifications. I mean, the entire show of Hawkeye is about that. I mean, Clint didn't kill Natasha, but he's the reason she's dead.
Yeah.
Like, so I really hope that they don't kind of gloss over that emotional character development for her, and we see her try to deal with that.
Yeah. But I think that was pretty interesting. I think another complaint maybe I do have of the finale is less loose ends were tied up than I thought going into the finale, so there was a lot of tying up that had to get done.
Yeah.
Obviously, we see the Yelena Clint, we see the Eleanor and Kate, we see Maya and Kazi, we see Maya and Kingpin kind of just with, in general, the tracksuits against Clint and Kate. I just, like, there was an aspect where I thought it was a little busy, and maybe that's part of the issue for me, is I kind of did think there was, like, just a lot happening, where it just felt like I felt originally that we had been moving very well between, we started all the way down at just like the tracksuits, and have now moved all the way up to, you know, Kingpin and Eleanor being involved, blah, 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 blah. But then, like, less was wrapped up than I anticipated. Like, I didn't think we'd see the fight between Maya and Kazi. I literally, when she came in on the motorcycle straight, I was like, who is that? Because I didn't expect her to even make an appearance.
No, when she was in her room, I was like, all right, we're seeing the origin story of Echo. Like,
yeah.
Okay. And I think I said this to you before, like, when they had the scene on the roof. So I guess that was, what, episode 4?
Yeah,
episode
that's
4.
When Elena came in.
That, you know, it was two diverging storylines, but really you find out they're, like, you know, part of the same tree.
Right.
But I really thought that, you know, Echo's / Maya's was gonna stop growing. That, like, you know, we were kind of done with her after episode 5 when she kind of...
Well, that's what I thought with Ronan and all that. Yeah,
I was like, all right, so she's done with her little mission for now, and we're gonna see the rest of those ramifications play out in her show when she goes after Kingpin. I was not expecting her to have her little rendezvous with Kingpin in his lair, or whatever you call it, his office.
I was kind of fine with that. I just really didn't expect anything that happened past that.
No, I didn't. I was like, that whole confrontation, everything about that, where she's gonna either fight him from the inside or do what she ever, you know, however that show plays out, I was like, that's gonna take place all in that show. Mm-hmm. I did not expect it to take time, not in that way, but take time during Hawkeye to do that, because I didn't feel like it needed to be set up that explicitly. Like, all right, cool, I'm okay with that loose end, because I know that there's, like, more to that thread coming. You've confirmed that for me. Cool, great. Leave that be, and let's focus on, like, the other 3 plot lines we've got going, because, you know, and I think that's, you brought up Falcon and the Winter Soldier before. I think that was what a lot of people's complaints were with that finale as well, and, like, the back half of that show, was they had a little bit too many plot lines going along, and, like, did not, you know, you can wrap up a plot line halfway through a season and, you know, focus on 1 or 2, you know? So I kind of wish Marvel would have done that, and I thought up until this point they were moving to, you know, great, they set up Maya, they gave her foundation, we're done with her, we don't need her in episode 6.
Well, and like I said, I never expected to really see Kingpin in the battle. Yeah. I wasn't surprised that we maybe saw him a little bit prior. So I did expect to see him in the episode, maybe to establish him a little more. So
when we saw a confrontation between him and Eleanor.
Yeah. So when we saw him in, you know, Spider-Man, it wasn't just, oh, Kingpin was mentioned once in the show kind of thing. Didn't expect his involvement. So those are already, like, 2 big lines that I didn't really anticipate. And then that bled kind of into the Kate and Eleanor part of it, because that made that entire thing bigger than it would have been. So I just kind of was, like, really thrown off with the extent of how many battles were happening and how many plot lines were desperately in need to wrap up. I mean, even the Jack and Kate plot line, you know, they had to bring him in to have him, like, I just felt there was a lot going on. Then you had, like, the LARPers, which I
love them.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with them, but then I'm like, then you have, like, all these people, like, I just was like, there's just a lot colliding in this. Yeah. So I think that's probably my biggest issue with it, was just so much was going on, and I truly did think a lot of the storylines were at least wrapped up, or enough towards the point where they weren't going to be involved in that final battle moment, but then they were. And that's what kind of threw me off.
I agree. However, we've talked a bunch about the final battle. I do want to say it was beautiful. It was so interesting just visually. I mean, having them on the ice with the skates when they did the slow-mo of them, like, doing their thing, the way they fought so effortlessly together, the way he called her his partner.
Yeah.
I mean, that didn't happen in the battle, happened previous to it, but I was like, you know what? This is amazing. Like, we're seeing a little baby super partnership hero team, and I'm good with that. Like, it just made me really happy.
Well, and then to my point, what Clint always does is he has to take the strays home. Yeah. So, of course, then he took Kate home. And I thought that was a great moment, but I want to talk about that last scene because I think I don't know if I know I said it to Taylor before.
I don't think it was on air.
I don't think it was on air, and I don't think I mentioned it literally anywhere else, so the only proof I have is Taylor's word that I said it.
But I can vouch for her, she did say these words.
Because I don't know if it's been confirmed in the MCU itself, I cannot remember, or if it was just confirmed from comic, or I'm not 100% sure. It might be just comic that I knew it from, but Clint does meet his wife at S.H.I.E.L.D. She's a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent.
Romance, everybody.
Yeah, so she's a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. And so while we were grossly incorrect about the watch, we also were talking about how, you know, she has a lot of information. And maybe I did say it on air.
We did say it on air, actually.
Whoa.
I mean, we had the conversation on air.
Because I was like, wait a second. It was mentioned because we were talking about why she has so much information.
Well, that, and we talked about whether the watch belonged to Coulson.
Yeah. Because we were talking, so while we were grossly wrong about who the watch actually belonged to, I did, when we were like, why does his wife seem to have so much information and we couldn't figure that out, I do think I did say it.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really interesting, and I think her storyline goes to show, like, he said, you know, it would blow someone's cover. She likely had been killed, quote unquote, killed off by S.H.I.E.L.D. as a way to go dark, so she could move and do her family and, you know, whatever.
And it makes the whole line from episode 5 where she's like, but we moved so far away. And he's like, it's never far enough away. Like, she made her own enemies. Like, it's not just his, you know, the people he put away, but, like, also her time at S.H.I.E.L.D. and the enemies that she made. So I thought that, like, that reveal gave that conversation a lot more depth.
Well, and it just made the watch make more sense. Because I couldn't really understand, like, our theories I could kind of have argued for it, but I, like, couldn't understand why Hawkeye seemed to have such an emotional investment into it. So that definitely, like, helped. Was I was like, okay, I get this now. I'm interested because a lot of people were talking about, along with the string, was that would we see her getting brought back in as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent? Or, because I believe she also has an actual, like, superhero name.
Isn't it? It's Mockingbird, right? That's what I keep seeing online.
I think so. So, a lot of people are like, now that we're kind of hinting towards this, are we going to see it? Because it's never been hinted at fully before.
Yeah, it's, to your point, and I saw someone say this online, like, it's weird that now they're bringing in all of these references to, like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., considering that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been dismantled. God, when did the Cap do that? 2014?
Yeah.
So, it's 2024, 10 years ago? S.H.I.E.L.D.'s been dismantled for 10 years now? Like...
Well, I don't know. That's why I don't really know. I also don't really know why he would have had her watch of all things with him at the Avengers compound. That seemed a little off to me.
Yeah.
Just because I was like, doesn't seem like something you would have left with you. Or, my biggest thing is, which is why I think there might be a reason, and they might be bringing her back in as Mockingjay, possibly, is because they were going after the watch. I think
it's Mockingbird.
Mockingbird, sorry. Hunger Games. Because they were going after the watch from the get-go.
Yeah.
So...
But think about it this way. She had all that information on the family, and who was running the tracksuits at the time? Maya. So I think Maya put it together.
That's possible.
That, you know, Clint's connection with Ronan, and then started piecing together all that information about his family.
I just don't know why they would have thought to go after the watch to begin with. Because he knew that Maya did not know that his wife was who she was. Because he said if it came out who she was when he was talking about his associate.
Yeah, but I think it's possible that Maya had an inkling that it was related to the Barton family, and that's why she wanted it. And if it had as much information as the Bartons made it seem, like, that would blow her cover. Like, they would then know exactly what she did.
I mean, I was a little sad, though, that it wasn't a bigger implication.
I really wanted it to be Coulson. I just really love Clark Gregg.
I think that would have been interesting. I also think it would have been interesting had it been, you know, Cap, like Steve Cap, just because we haven't had any real confirmation, and then we've now had multiple works that reference him, and, like, even Spider-Man with the shield. So I'm like, I'm just a little confuzzled, because I'd like to understand where he actually is, and or if he's dead.
Even Agent Hill, like, it could have been, because she's confirmed for Secret Wars. They just confirmed that Colby Smulders is coming back to reprise her role. But if you think about it, she and Fury were both Skrulls in Far From Home, so we don't actually know where the heck Marie has been.
Well, that's what I mean. So it's like, I feel like there were a lot of people it could have been, and while I like, get it a little bit, why they kept it within, I think this goes back to my earlier point where I'm like, I still don't get the implications of Hawkeye the show quite as much, because we knew it was going to be a passing the torch kind of thing, but it wasn't even a full passing of the torch show. So it was like, so what really is the implications past what we already knew, which is Young Avengers and eventually Dark Avengers?
I think, unfortunately, I'm so sad I'm going to say this, but I think it's fallen into the trap of the other shows in that it's a character development vehicle.
Yeah, but at least, like, the other shows, you know the implications are going to be there for later on. You know what I mean? Like, I don't mind the character development, but, like, WandaVision, that was all there to establish her as a Scarlet Witch for the future because of Multiverse of Madness.
Right.
With the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we got our new Captain America through that.
That I would characterize as character development.
Yeah, but, like, we didn't get anything new out of this. Like, we knew Kate was coming into it, but it's like, that's what we got then. And we got a bigger look at Hawkeye, but I don't feel like...
Well, we got Kingpin.
Well, yeah.
Echo.
But I'm saying, we got plenty of characters from WandaVision and Loki and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But, like, my thing is just, I understood their implication, like, there were implications that took place in those shows that I did not expect, versus Hawkeye's was, like, everything we kind of already knew. I think the only thing we really didn't know was Kingpin, but past the, first episode we already knew?
He was in our predictions episode, we called that one too.
Oh, okay, well then there you go. So, like, my point just being is, like, I like to make predictions, I like to think of the theories, but sometimes, like, I hate being so on the nose that nothing blew me away, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, up until this point, I think we thought we were not as on. So, for example, like, I think in episodes 1 through 5, they did a pretty good job of obscuring, like, we got the whole Watch thing completely wrong twice. So,
but like I said, I was a little disappointed about the Watch thing.
Right.
So it was like,
I'm just saying, 1 through 5, there was still room for them to blow us away.
Yeah.
And then by the end of 6, it was like, oh.
And that's why I said I think the biggest thing that they could have done to blow me away, personally, honestly, would have been if Yelena had killed Clint. I just think that would have been something that I would not have seen Marvel doing.
I mean, that's fair. I don't even know what I expected. I think I was hoping they would tie him to the larger MCU a little more. This show, while it obviously played off things that we've seen in the past and set up things for the future, it did not necessarily have the wider implications that I was promised. And so I was kind of thinking, all right, instead of doing this, 2-minute long musical number, I thought maybe we'd see, like, a Kingpin doing something interesting. Not even that specifically, but something that was a little more...
Honestly, I would have at least been happy if they would have panned and it was Yelena watching it. And I even said that. I was like, oh, Yelena's watching it. And then they didn't show anyone in the audience.
Or Coulson, or somebody, or old Steve, or anybody.
Yeah, and I would have been like, dang. But instead it was just the musical number. So I kind of was like, cool. Thanks. Yeah. Like, yeah.
No, I agree. I was a little bummed.
Know what? What did we say about WandaVision?
I don't know. We said a lot of things about WandaVision. Mephisto!
We said that the ending was a little underwhelming, and that's kind of where I stand with Hawkeye. I loved the show up until this ending. Yeah. I just feel like it was busy, and then on top of being busy, there just wasn't anything like, whoa,
Yeah.
that just happened.
For whatever
That's
reason,
really going to affect Phase 4.
Marvel has had some real issues sticking the landing on their shows.
Honestly, the only one I think I personally believe had the best landing was Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I agree. But to be fair, the beginning and middle were weaker than some of the other shows.
And I can admit to that, but because I've had a favorite character now in every single one of these shows, I've been eating good all year. But no, and I can admit to that. But I will say, I think that was the only one that really stuck the landing of the ending. I think the only reason Loki had a semi-okay ending was because of the implications, not because the actual last episode was that good. Personally, I just think, like, it's the implications of it. It was just, okay, the multiverse, and now he's in a different timeline. But I don't think most of that episode was really that great. WandaVision's was kind of like, oh,
yeah,
cool, kind of thing. Like, and it was a battle scene, but it just didn't feel...
It didn't feel epic.
No, for what was going on. I mean, you had 2 witches fighting and 2 visions fighting, and it didn't feel like it had, like, a lot
of... The gravitas wasn't there.
Yeah, and then, you know, with this, it was kind of the same gist, where it was just like, oh...
Like, the battle scenes themselves were cool.
It just
But it just didn't have the... Not the scenes themselves, but the actual, to your point, the implications and the ramifications didn't have the wow factor I was hoping to see. Like, it was visually interesting. I enjoyed watching it.
Yeah.
But cerebrally, that's not a word, but I'm making it up right here, right now. Cerebrally, I wanted more. I wanted more MCU stimulation, if you will.
Well, yeah, and that's why, like, to this day, I mean, we were screaming and throwing ourselves to the floor. I'm not even, like, blowing that out of proportion. That is literally what happened when we were watching the finale of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, we were eating food, and I swear to God, both of us almost threw food at different points.
Yeah, like, I was throwing myself out of my chair because I was, like, so just like, oh my God, like...
The suit!
Like,
this!
Yeah, I mean, even showing off Hawkeye's more comic-accurate suit, they just, like, he took off his clothes and changed.
Yeah.
Like,
I will say, though, I did make the comment, okay, whoever they got as their Phase 4 costume designer, man, I mean, I don't know if this person has not done 1 through 3. I can't think they did, because 4 has just been stellar in terms of comic accuracy for everybody. I mean, Hawkeye's was definitely toned down a little bit because his costume in the comics
but not all
garish.
not all of the comics, because some of the comics, that is his exact costume.
Right, I'm just thinking of the one with the face mask.
Yeah,
like, that's the one I
But
think
his
of.
newer ones are not, because, like, a lot of the ones where he's in with Natasha and Bucky, because I have a lot of those, that's his costume with the arrow across his chest in that way. Like, that's what he wears.
Yeah, I guess I just always think of the one that Kate drew in, like, episode 3 with the, like, awful headpiece thing.
I mean, to be fair, they weren't always great.
No.
But, yeah, I mean, and to your point, the costumes, but like I said, like, that wasn't even a momentous moment. Like, they didn't even make that a big, like, whoa!
It was definitely no Sam, like, flying in through the window and doing, like, a superhero pose with the shield and his new, like, wings.
And you were like, dang, okay. Like, Captain America just showed
Cap.
up. Like, I don't know. I just, like we said about WandaVision, a little underwhelmed. I'm not gonna lie. And then, like, the end credits not being any, like, at least Wanda had end credits that were like, oh, okay. Yeah. We see each other kind of thing.
And I think this is almost even more painful than WandaVision or any of the others, because we have loved this show from the, I think we may have had, 1 or 2 criticisms in 5 episodes. I mean, so for them to let me down so wholeheartedly in episode 6, I just wanted them to come out clear and free and just perfect. I wanted them to have one show where I didn't find an episode where I was like, no.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. I'm just so disappointed.
I agree. And it wasn't inherently bad. I just didn't...
I think, too, to your point, it wasn't a bad episode. But when you put it in comparison with the others, like, we have been flying so high for 5 episodes. And so, like, this was probably just as good as, like, some of the more mediocre Loki or Falcon and Winter Soldier or even WandaVision episodes. It's probably on par with those, right?
Yeah, but as a finale.
Yeah, well, that, and also when you compare it to the actual beat-by-beat perfection that was episodes 1 through 5, it just pales. It's like those were a rainbow and this is just like a white piece of paper, you know? Like, it just does not, it pales in comparison.
No, I agree, and that kind of makes me sad.
Me too.
Just because, like, I and it still will likely be going down as the best MCU show so far of this year.
For 2021, it's my favorite, hands down. even with episode 6.
But I will say, like, I think the reason I hype up the Falcon and the Winter Soldier so much is not because my absolute favorite character's in it, but because the ending, when you just end so well, you forget all the issues you had with it before. But now I almost have and I said this before we started recording, now I almost have the opposite effect with Hawkeye, where I was like, I literally was coming off every episode with the biggest hype. I was like, today's a good day, because I literally was like, this is so good, like, they didn't miss, and I think I've said that in almost every blog post. I'm like, this episode didn't miss, because it hasn't. And then the ending, I just kind of was like, okay.
Yeah.
And now it just kind of, like, doesn't make me feel the way that every other episode did, so now the show itself is kind of, like, tinted.
Yeah.
Because
it, like, so when you're talking about, like, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you almost look at it with, like, rose-colored glasses, because you're like, that last episode, like, it all must have been that good.
Yeah.
Right? But, like, this, you're like, oh, that last episode, was it all not that good?
Yeah.
Like, even though,
it
you know, go back, the last 4 episodes that we've done, yes, it was. Like,
I mean,
it was
give
that
me an
good.
ending like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Hawkeye, and I would have been like, yeah.
Oh my god.
There you go.
Yeah.
You did it.
Yeah.
That's all I needed.
I just need Marvel to, like, complete a show, beginning to end, beat for beat perfection. They've gotten so close now, just like,
Yeah, I think, ironically, this is something that I think Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man had suffered from. Spider-Man 3 was the kind of almost too many villains issue.
Yeah.
Because they didn't wrap up enough of the storylines. So you had Uncle, aka Kingpin. You had his tracksuits. You had Kazi, who has to be considered separate.
Yeah.
Because of, like, his character development versus just the regular tracksuits. Yeah. You had Yelena. Like, and you had Eleanor. Yeah, I was just about to say.
And her fiance, whose name is
Jack.
Thank you.
Like, briefly a villain. So it's just kind of like, that is genuinely kind of what it suffered from, was the fact you just had too many. It wasn't even fully the storylines as it was the villains. You just had too many players on the playing field.
Yeah. And they did not, to your point, take them. Like, you can take off people midway through it.
I listed who I thought was never going to be in that battle because I assumed we handled what we needed to handle enough for this series for them to be able to be seen later on. I genuinely thought it was going to be tracksuits. Kazi involved. I didn't think Maya would be there, and I thought we'd have that Yelena scene. I only knew we'd have the Yelena scene because of the previews. I didn't know if we'd see it because I didn't know if she'd still go after Clint or not after the end of episode 5.
Yeah.
Because of her and Kate kind of having some sort of a friendship. I don't know if we got a friendship yet, but, like,
it's getting there.
Yeah. So, but that's really what I expected to see. I didn't really expect Eleanor to play such a big role. Ironically, I just kind of thought, I kept thinking she was going to get killed. Yeah. I just assumed they were going to kill her off, which I was like, I mean, I kind of assumed, but then they didn't. So there was just too much going on for me.
I agree.
But those are my things.
Yeah, I think we hit everything that I wanted to talk about. Just, I think the overwhelming feeling in the house today is just, because we're together again.
Holidays.
The overwhelming feeling is underwhelmed.
Yeah, and I mean, we get made fun of a lot for that because that's what we kept saying about WandaVision.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually like a thing in our house. If you say the word underwhelmed, like everybody kind of looks at each other funny now, but there's no better word for it, truthfully.
Because that is how we walked away from WandaVision, like just muttering, well, that was underwhelming. That was just underwhelming.
I think I must have said that word 40 times that evening.
Yeah, but, yeah, so I mean, I still like the episode itself as a whole. There was just a lot.
Yeah, I think my, elevator pitch for this episode is good episode, pales in comparison to the rest of the series. Not the quality ending I was hoping for.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Right. So that's a wrap, not only on this episode, but on Hawkeye and new content for 2021. Although,
to be fair, we only have, a week and a half left of 2021 anyway, so it's not even that big of a deal.
But it's been a heck of a year, guys, so thank you so much for finding us, joining us, sticking with us through everything.
Yeah.
We have one more episode that we're coming out with in 2021, where we just do a little recap on the year. You've probably heard us talk a little bit about some of it, but we're going to talk about the shows, the movies, all that good stuff, and also a little bit of a preview about what we're excited for next year, because that's right around the corner, and hopefully we'll bring some really good stuff, because 2021 was a good year for us.
Heck yeah.
All right. As always, if you're a fan of the show but you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and do so on your platform of choice. You can check out on the blog. We have a special page where we list out all the platforms that we're available on. So if you haven't found your platform of choice yet, go check that out. And if we're not on it, tweet at us. We'll try to get on there. Speaking of the blog, go give that a follow as well. We mention it a lot because Katie does a really, really good job of giving extra context, extra thoughts, extra theories, just extra everything is always...
I try. Extra is my middle name.
Is always on the blog. And then last but not least, check us out on Spotify, a separate profile than our actual podcast itself. Let's Talk MFT, where we have playlist for the different shows and also a large playlist for all of the episodes relating to the movies, reactions, predictions, and some extra context episodes that have to do with the movies on there as well.
And as always, we have our Twitter, which is also Let's Talk MFT. So check that out. Go give it a follow. All Marvel news and theories are shared on there, along with our own theories and thoughts, and also the blog and podcasts when they come up. So everything you need would be in one spot. So definitely go give that a follow. And for this kind of slight wrap of content, I can say I hope you kept up with all of it this year. And who knows what 2022 is fully going to be giving us. Oh, that felt weird saying 2022.
I'm not ready.
Did not know that. I was gonna ask you if that was the right year we were going into. And then I was like, yeah, it is. But I hope everyone's kept up with the content, and Marvel just blew your mind, so let's talk about it.